Tony Rivera, Managing Director of Azure Minerals Limited. Tony has worked as an exploration and mining geologist for over 30 years, and for the past 19 years as Managing Director of Azure Minerals. Yeah, wow. He has been responsible for the discovery of several gold and nickel deposits in Australia, which were developed into operating mines. His most famous discoveries were the Cosmos and the Cosmos Deep Nickel Sulfide deposits, and we've heard about who's got them this morning. In 2000, AMEC awarded him with the Prospector of the Year award for the Cosmos discovery. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for the opportunity to tell you the Azure Minerals story. And this story really is about the company which is now a nickel explorer and developer, and it's working on the Andover Nickel and Copper Project, which is likely to be the latest, the newest nickel province that's been identified in Australia, and it's certainly given the company a very bright future. The usual disclaimer statements, and these can be found on our website if you'd like to read them in more detail. It's very important that we acknowledge the traditional custodians of land which we operate on, which is in the West Pilbara region. The Ngarluma people that are there have a very strong attachment to their ground. We've been working very closely and very closely with them to develop a very strong and positive relationship with the local people, and that's benefiting both themselves and us at the moment. It's really important that we do that well. Corporately, there's a snapshot there, and you can read this in more detail, but probably one of the picks out of that is our second largest shareholder is Mark Creasy and his group, and Azure Minerals is one of 3 companies up here on the stage in which Mark Creasy has a significant ownership, not only of the companies but also of the project level as well. So the Andover Project, it's a nickel, copper, cobalt sulfide project located in the West Pilbara region of Western Australia. It's a joint venture between Azure with 60% ownership and the Creasy Group with 40% ownership. We acquired our 60% ownership from Mark Creasy in July of 2020, which was around about the deepest part of the downturn post the onset of COVID and prior to the pickup that came about 6 months later. So we acquired the project at just the right time, and not only that, we were also able to acquire or to employ some really great geoscientists who at that stage there was not a great rush on people, and there was a strong no skill shortage at that stage, which developed a few months later. We've had great success in our 2 years of exploration. We've made 4 good nickel and copper sulfide discoveries on the ground, and we're using traditional methods of exploration, and I'll get onto that in a moment. And not only do we have those 4 discoveries, but we've also identified a pipeline of new targets, new prospects. I wouldn't necessarily say we've got dozens of targets, but we've certainly got more than 10 and up to potentially 20 really top quality targets that have yet to be drill tested by the company. And the location of Andover is in the West Pilbara. It's located about 40 kilometres to the east of Karratha and about 5 kilometres to the south of the town of Roebourne. So where we are located is in the epicentre of one of the strongest mining environments in Australia. So just to the south of us we have Rio Tinto with all of their iron ore mines. To the north of us offshore there's all of the oil and gas infrastructure out there as well. There are new mines being developed in the area as well. So we have a sealed highway that crosses our property. We've got a gas pipeline that crosses the property, high voltage power lines, potable water pipelines, all crossing our property or very close to the property. Only 40 kilometres to the town of Karratha and then Dampier, where there is a port access as well. So from an infrastructure point of view, you couldn't get a project that is in a better location anywhere in Australia. So in terms of this definition of a new nickel province in Western Australia, it's certainly proving to be look to be the case. It is a very target-rich environment. We went in there into the Andover Project. It's a layered mafic, ultramafic intrusive complex. We have about 70 square kilometres of that complex within our property. And it's proving to be highly fertile with multiple prospects and indications of nickel and copper mineralisation being identified. We've been drilling there non-stop for now exactly 12 months now. October 2020 we started. Nearly 200 drill holes have been drilled for over 85,000 metres of diamond drilling, and that drilling has been going on continuously in that 2-year period. We've identified and defined the maiden mineral resource for the Andover nickel deposit, which takes its name from the overall project. And we've also currently just completed drilling a second deposit called Ridgeline, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. What we've implemented here is a strategy to fast-track this project as quickly as we can. So we have a dual pathway strategy that's been employed. So not only are we drilling for exploration and drilling for out resources and continuing on with the exploration stage of the project, but we're also carrying out the development studies program. So we have the intention of being able to release development studies on an ongoing basis over the next couple of years, with the intention of, hopefully what we'll be able to prove is to be the case, is a hub and spoke model where we have a centralised processing facility that is surrounded by several deposits which will turn into mines, which will feed into that central processing facility. And what we've, as I mentioned earlier, we were able to employ some really top quality geoscientists in that sort of second half of 2020, and these guys are highly experienced in nickel exploration, particularly magmatic nickel exploration, which is the style of nickel sulfides that come in these layered mafic, ultramafic intrusions. Because we have employed them and they are solely working on the Andover project, they're focused there, they've been able to develop really strong, robust geological models of the mineralisation that we've got within the complex, the processes by which they formed, the locations in which they are, these nickel sulfide mineralisation is settling out, and how to find them with geology, geophysics, geochemistry and the like. And we've been able to leverage off that information and that data sets that we've been building and move straight into the exploration and discovery stage. And this is what gives us at Andover a real advantage over the top of some of the other companies that have been that you would have heard of today, because in our Andover project, over 80% of the project area is outcrop. So we have basement rocks sticking out of the ground which host the nickel and the copper sulfide mineralisation. So we don't have to go and look through deep soil cover, salt water and other extraneous elements which might distract you. The mineralisation actually sticks out of the ground here, and we've found, as I said earlier, 10, 20 different, or maybe potentially more, examples of this mineralisation. So geological mapping on surface is very important, and then also surface sampling, just taking hundreds and thousands of samples in regular traverses across the project area and being able to, through that area, identify the corridors of mineralisation. Then followed up with electromagnetic surveying, the geophysics component, and then followed by diamond drilling. So there's a couple of photos on here. On the right-hand photo is a nickel-rich gossan that sits over the top of the Andover deposit itself. This is a great example of what you're looking at there. The dark brown material is very nickel-rich. There are a few scraps of green in there, which is the copper mineralisation as well. This is the only gossan on the area out of dozens that we've found on the project area where old-timers actually had a little crack at it. There's a small pit in there, probably a couple of metres around. That's it. All the other indications of mineralisation that we're finding on surface are totally untouched by modern or even historical exploration. And the left-hand side there's some copper mineralisation that we cracked open some fresh rocks at surface. We're finding good copper mineralisation there as well. So the mineralisation, the nickel and the copper mineralisation actually sticks out of the ground. And the fact that it's only 5 kilometres south of a town and we've got all that infrastructure running through the area, and these deposits have never been identified previously, is simply remarkable. So this is the first deposit that we drilled out. This is the Andover Deposit. It's about a bit over 4.5 million tonnes of about 1.4% nickel equivalent for 75,000 tonnes of contained metal, nickel, copper and cobalt. A very robust resource. It starts just below surface. 80% of the resource is in the indicated category, so a very high confidence level in this resource. The deposit itself lends itself to an underground mining operation, which is what we're planning as part of our development studies now. And this project, the development of this particular deposit is well advanced from the study point of view. And then we have the Ridgeline Deposit. Now, on this image, on the right-hand side, you have that red mustache-looking feature. That is the surface expression or projected to surface of the mineralisation in the Andover Deposit. Only 200 metres away, we found the Ridgeline Deposit. Now, this is completely blind. It's the only one we've found so far that doesn't stick out of the ground. We found it through geophysics, and we've been drilling it non-stop for most of this year. We recently completed the resource drill out, and that mineralisation looks to be quite solid as well, in that we have two very high-grade shoots of nickel and copper mineralisation within a much wider zone of lower-grade disseminated mineralisation. And when you zoom in on some of the drill hits that we've got in these mineralised shoots, this is the photograph shows one of the holes, hole 134, 6.3 metres at 3.6% nickel, and you can see the numbers on there. We did half-metre sampling to get an idea of the internal variability of the mineralisation, and you can see the first couple of samples we went into were 2.2% nickel, and then everything after that is 3 to 4 and up to nearly 5% nickel, and in those massive sulphides. And some indications on the left-hand side there is also some of the other drill intercepts we've had from these high-grade shoots. So the massive nickel sulphides we're getting at Ridgeline are looking really positive. Yesterday we announced the results from our initial metallurgical test work program that we ran on this mineralisation, and the results have been absolutely excellent. So we're looking at being able to produce a nickel concentrate with around 13% nickel, with an 80% recovery of the nickel into the concentrate, and for a copper concentrate, about 25.5% nickel would be the grade, with once again getting close to 80% recovery into those concentrates. So it looks really positive. What we're doing now is that the information from the Ridgeline Deposit will be fed in and combined with the Andover information, the Andover Deposit information, and they will be combined into a development study. But we are just literally scratching the surface here. So this is an image that shows in blue is the outline of the tenement. It's 70 square kilometres. The various colours in there are the various different rock types that we have in there. Bottom left-hand corner, you've got the Ridgeline Deposit, then Andover, a couple of prospects, Atrium and Woodbrook, which have yet to be drilled. Seaview and Skyline, where we're drilling and we're hitting and have hit good nickel and copper mineralisation. Not quite at the deposit stage yet, but drilling is continuing there as well. And that southwest to northeast trend, we've defined it over 4 kilometres, and we're now indications from our regional exploration that it continues for at least another 6 kilometres to the northeast as well, with outcropping gossans all the way along it, and also electromagnetic conductors that need to be followed up. And those two combined, outcropping gossans, favourable rock types, geophysical anomalies through the electromagnetic surveying, all give us the targets that we can go in there and do the diamond drilling on. So the dual pathway for the development of this project. Now, what we're looking at, as I said earlier, is two different pathways. One of them is drilling. So it's exploration drilling, resource definition drilling, and also just the regional geological exploration that we carry out across the project area. Simultaneously, we're running the development studies. So at this stage, we've completed the metallurgical test work on the Andover Deposit and the Ridgeline Deposit. Geotechnical studies have been completed. Mining studies are nearly finished. Mineral processing was announced yesterday as well, so we've got a preferred route for that. A preferred route for that has been identified, and the other components are also either completed or are nearing completion at the moment. The intention would be that we would release a scoping study into the potential development of the Andover and Ridgeline deposits, and that scoping study would potentially be announced in the first quarter of next year. And we see this Andover project overall, the overall project area, as having the ability to host multiple nickel mines feeding into that centralised processing facility that we talked about earlier. But you can't build mines in areas unless you have the cooperation of the local communities or the support of the local communities. We work really hard with both the general widespread community, but also very much the local Indigenous communities as well. That's very important that we have their support for what we're doing. You can't do it without having proper environmental controls, and you need to be able to do it in such a way as that potential investors and potential downstream processors or acquirers of your product are satisfied that you've actually fulfilled your ESG obligations, and that's totally necessary in today's world. We also intend to be able to produce our concentrates in such a way that they are as low in terms of carbon emissions as absolutely possible, and that product that we produce will be traceable through the entire chain to the end product where it turns into, you know, batteries in Europe or wherever. So it's very important that we complete our ESG obligations to the highest level possible. So that's the Andover story, dual pathway towards production, successful exploration plus the development studies. We are well cashed up at the moment, and obviously with the nickel and the copper and the cobalt we have at Andover, we have very strong exposure to the high value end of the battery metal spectrum, as opposed to, say, the lower end, maybe your lithiums and your manganeses and graphites and your like. The nickel and your copper and cobalt are very much the high value end. And also we have a really good team in place, not only the exploration team, but our mine development team, and also the management and the board as well. So the company's in a very strong position. And I'll just finish up here with 1 second over. Sorry, Dan. This is a photograph of part of the town of Roebourne, which is where we have our base here, which is where we do all our core processing and logging and the like. And in the middle distance, you can see a range of hills, not the mountains, right, the hills right at the very back, but the ones in the middle distance. That's what's known as the Andover complex. That's where we work. It's only 5 kilometres from the local town. So once again, the company's in a very strong position. Thank you.